Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Saeki of GST. It is a great honor for us to be able to have this program with such a large turnout tuning in online. I would like to give you a few words on behalf of the organizer of this event. Agora is themed under science, beyond nationality, generation, and areas of specialties. Since 2006, this event has been held, and this is the sixth of such an event, and this year is a very special one. 53 million people have been infected with COVID-19, and more than 1.3 million people have died out of this disease. I would like to take this opportunity to express our condolences to those who have been killed and also those who have been bereaved. The rising number of people infected with this disease is causing a concern in this country, but in terms of the number of cases per population, our situation is better than it can be. And I would also like to take this opportunity to express our sincere and heartfelt appreciation for those fighting against coronavirus, especially in the middle of the pandemic in the medical industry. This event will give you a good breath for thought to think about the situation, and with this understanding, we have put the theme as life this year. How should we be able to protect our lives? And how will our lives be influenced? And how will science and technology impact our well-being for the next 8 days? Through 100 programs, we'll be exploring the answers to these questions. We have attached importance to face-to-face communication, but this year, Science Agora 2020 has put the highest priority to the safety of the participants and the audience, and that is why we are convening this event online. But this also has had a positive impact in the sense that people far away from Tokyo can also tune in. So regardless of the generation, region, and gender, and age groups, anyone can now join this event. The Science Agora Week, starting today, hopefully will give you lots of opportunities for meeting new people and knowing new knowledges. Let's start Science Agora 2020. Shoko Takahashi will be moderating this session.
Good morning and hello and welcome to Science Agora, and I am a member of the Science Agora 2020 Steering Committee. My name is Shoko Takahashi and I'll be serving as the facilitator. And we are here at Miraikan, and we are connected online as we bring to you this event. The new coronavirus was an unprecedented disease, and our daily lives have really changed. I believe many of you have seen great changes in your life as well as businesses, and you may be feeling very nervous and tense as you try to live your lives. Maybe your place of study or place of work, place of research has been confined to your home. You may not be able to meet your friends and your colleagues. I believe the priorities in our lives also have changed during this course. I am focusing on bringing robots into our daily lives for a more barrier-free lifestyle. Maybe you thought that robots are things of the future. However, now we have to bring them into our daily lives. But even if we are faced with that, we still lack the infrastructure to really bring in these technologies into our daily lives. We are now faced with great changes in our daily lives and our life as well as our being as well. But our lives and society, how should they change to incorporate these changes? People in science and research and people like us who utilize technology, we must share our perspectives, and therefore this year's Science Agora will focus on life from all perspectives to look at life under Corona. Now, in this opening session, in order to live our life very happily, what is it that science and technology can do, and what kind of society do we foresee in the future? We have 5 experts to focus on this question. And the keyword is well-being. To live well, we have given this keyword to the 5 presenters. So sometimes we may have the coronavirus, but we may be asymptomatic, so we might feel as if we are okay, but maybe what we do is really affecting the people around us, and that's what's making it much more difficult to deal with COVID-19. And it's not just about this infectious disease. I believe we can say the same about our judgments that we make in our daily lives and how we behave in our daily life. I believe we were made to realize that as we faced COVID-19. So our well-being and the well-being of others, how can we balance between the two? I believe now is the time to really thoroughly think about this. Now we are all living together in this era. So how do we protect ourselves from the threat of viruses, and how do we try to live well and happily? How can we utilize science and technology to do that? We have 5 panelists to think about this issue. Now, the first presenter is from Japan Science and Technology Agency President and Dr. Michinari Hamaguchi. He will be focusing on science and technology in his presentation.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the president of Japan Science and Technology Agency. It is a great source of joy for me to be able to join you online. Without further ado, I would like to start my presentation. Please put up my slide. Or maybe I will be joining you later. And then the second participant is a specialist in digital accessibility, thereby opening opportunities for social participation. Chieko Asakawa, IBM Fellow. Thank you very much. It is a great honor for me to join you today. And the third participant is a policymaker, Shinohara Hiromichi, Nippon Telegraph and Telephone Corporation Chairman of the Board, Council for Science and Technology and Innovation member. It is a great source for me to join you. And there are 2 participants joining us online. It is Hitachi Kyoto University Lab, a future-oriented lab scenario has been visualized with his technology. It is Professor Yoshinori Hiroi of Kyoto University. Good morning. I am Hiroi of Kyoto University. Looking forward to talking to you today. The second online participant is from IGPI, Industrial Growth Platforming Incorporated Group, and JSD Excel R&D Management Committee member, Chairman of IGPI, Kazuhiko Toyama. Looking forward to having a discussion with you. Thank you. So we are joined by 5 people, and we will first give the microphone to Dr. Hamaguchi. Thank you very much again. I would now like to start my presentation. Science for Global Well-Being is the title of my presentation this morning. Next slide, please. This year's Science Agora 2020 has a theme, life. The term life in English has many meanings, including life or livelihood or life as a journey. I am trained as a doctor, and I think that this has been a year that has made me think a lot about life. With the new coronavirus having a dire impact on our everyday life. Now, in terms of life, if you look at the livelihood of Japanese people, aside from the COVID-19, I think that the Japanese culture or the Japanese society is now at a confluence point. First is the issue of social structure, urban concentration or decline of regional cities and declining birth rates and aging. The second issue Japan is facing is the rapid development of digital transformation. But under the pandemic, we have learned that digital transformation of this country is lagging behind. Even though it has been pushing the digital transformation under the banner of Society 5.0, we are definitely lagging behind. And the third issue that has been revealed by coronavirus is the difficulty to maintain the industrial structure and innovation, or the innovation mind needs to be fostered. And this is the graph that shows the level of vitality of the Japanese society, 2006 at the top and 2016 at the bottom. As you can see, the balls that you saw in the upper graph has disappeared in the down chart, meaning that a great number of front-runner companies has declined or disappeared from the map. So we are now at a major turning point. Next slide, please. Now, that is the background before we entered into the period of COVID-19. A U.S. journal, Foreign Policy, called Japan's situation as Japan's mysterious pandemic success. They called that the pandemic situation in Japan is mysteriously successful. That is a connotation that they cannot fully understand why this is happening the way it is in Japan. This chart shows you the first and second waves of COVID-19 pandemic, and I think we are heading into the third wave. The chart in the left top shows you the number of new cases of COVID-19. And as you can see, the first wave, when the European strain came in, was smaller compared with the second wave, as encircled in blue. You can see the number of patients are larger, and the number is getting larger again. But if you look at the chart in the top right, red circle and blue circle, compare them, you can see that the situation is reversed. This is the number of deaths from COVID-19. As you can see, the number of deaths was larger in the first wave, and the death has been avoided in the second wave. Japanese medical landscape has been functioning very well, as you can see from these charts. In April and May, PCR number was limited, and there was even an argument that Japan has not been able to capture the actual number of COVID-19 deaths, and that has been one argument. However, I would argue that that is not the case. Please look at the chart in the bottom. This shows you the monthly changes of COVID-19 death. And the blue line is the confirmed cases in 2019, and the red in 2020. These shows you the number of deaths YOY. As you can see, this year the number of deaths is smaller than 2019. People have been taking measures against the virus, and the number of deaths has, as a result, declined. Cumulative number of deaths is slightly shy of 2,000. And I would like to express my condolences to those who passed away. And there are some serious cases, and I can understand the situation is very difficult, but still Japan is relatively doing better. Now, this is the situation in the world. Left top shows the new cases, and gray line representing the world. And where is Japan? If you make a comparison to the cases of Japan, the number of cases in Japan is dramatically lower compared to the global cases because it is hovering just over the horizontal axis. And left chart is about the death number, and the number of deaths per million is 166 in the world and 794 in the States. But that in Japan is as low as 15. There's a number of reasons that explains the situation. One is the universal health care coverage, and the other is the improved treatment, learning from the lessons from the first wave. And the third is disciplined behavior on the part of the citizens taking measures against the virus. Now, development of vaccines and therapeutic drugs are the project of urgent needs. Other than that, there are a range of things that needs to be studied as well, from very basic to advanced. And the area encircled in blue is where JST is paying in particular attention to. And this is what we would call Plan B. Plan A specifically refers to vaccines and therapeutics drugs, focused by AMED. But JST is focusing on the area that is encircled in blue, that is more closely connected to people's relative livelihood. For example, discovery or disinfection of the disease in your everyday lives. So like I said, we have been focusing on the Plan B area. And those encircled in blue are already available in the world. For example, ostrich-derived antibody can work, and that can be applied onto the facial masks. And also remote telemedicine system. For example, pregnant women can go through periodical checkups without going to a hospital. And these technology can be delivered to doctors and hospitals. Now, so Plan B is being promoted to create a safe and secure world. Next slide. In April, when coronavirus started spreading in a wider area, Yuval Noah Harari mentioned about the two options. One option is to go to a totalitarian surveillance path, and the other is the nationalistic choice. Now, under international cooperation, we consider that transparency, fairness, and inclusiveness needs to be ensured so that trustworthy relationship can be established between the citizens to together overcome the pandemic. Science for Global Well-Being is the declaration by WEF, and that is the activity that JFD will focus on going forward. Now, here's a key question. How do you define happiness? I always think about Dr. Tetsu Nakamura in Afghanistan, who said that having meals together at home with family is the source of happiness. And that exactly is the definition that I have to think about again this year. And the bluebird in the left bottom, happiness can be closer than you imagine that may be. Also, uniqueness and possibilities needs to be maximized in a society. And in order to create such a society, science and technology needs to be advanced. And for the next 8 days, I hope that you will be having an enjoyable program with deeper understanding of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hamaguchi. So uniqueness and possibilities, trying to seek that, and also the trust between science and citizens is very important. Yes, because we are living in such a time, how do we face science is something that needs real thinking. And so science and technology is to empower people. And next, I believe, is a person who really has made that happen. So science empowering people's lives, and a person who has been working on accessibility, we have Dr. Chieko Asakawa from the IBM Fellow. Thank you very much. As a researcher and also as a visually impaired person, I would like to talk a little bit about our researches, and also I'd like to talk about a new normal lifestyle through my own experience and what are the accessibility problems that we face. And at the age of 14, I lost my eyesight after an accident in the pool, and I found two difficulties. One is that I had difficulty in information accessibility, and the second one was mobility. I wasn't able to go out alone. Now, 2020, today, information accessibility has increased and has improved greatly. If you use your smartphone, you can read the latest news. You can follow news on social media as well. And if you have e-books, you can read books anywhere. And if you use online banking, you can open a new account and you can check your own account without going to the bank. You have online meetings. And things have greatly changed in terms of information accessibility. And I have gone around the world to hold lectures, and I talked about our research and the importance of accessibility. And I felt that being able to share my experience is really great. However, this year, all the meetings have switched to online meetings. So remotely, I have held lectures like this, but in the past, as one participant, I didn't realize certain things, but I have noticed a lot of issues as I took part as a lecturer. When you have several dozens of people or several hundreds of people attending meetings, during an online presentation, as I experienced doing that, unfortunately, it's very difficult to understand how the audience is responding to what I'm saying. And that was really perplexing. And in my case, especially, the faces on the screen and also the chat that we may have during online meetings, I cannot really check that when I'm speaking. It's as if I'm speaking alone to myself in my own room. And it makes me anxious. And sometimes I think, am I really connected online? I'm sometimes worried that if my connection is still alive. If it's an on-site meeting, you will be able to sense if people are bored listening to you, or if people may laugh and people may shuffle around, and you can understand if they are interested or if they are really into what you're saying. So the response of the audience, I'm starting to think about ways to present the audience response through the screen when we have an online meeting, to analyze the response and turning that into sounds or something that you can touch. For example, maybe vibrations to show that people are laughing or clapping, or if people seem bored, you might use something that tells you that people are sleepy, maybe something tactile that could teach you that that's the response you're getting. Now, in the real world accessibility, I have been focusing on that in my recent research, because if you go around in town and you want to know where you are walking, what stores are around you, are there long lines of queues in front of a store, or is there a friend approaching you? You can't really see it if you are visually impaired. So my biggest challenge was to improve the accessibility in the real world. From 2017, the AI Suitcase, we have created this. This is a suitcase that will tell you to avoid something that is in front of you, or if there's a stair in front of you, or it will tell you if there is a store that may be interesting to you. So you can really enjoy walking around town using this navigation robot, the AI Suitcase. So why is it a suitcase? It's a very simple reason. I sometimes walk in the airport and I will hold my suitcase in front of me. So if I bang into a wall, I won't be the first one to bang into the wall. It will be a suitcase. And if there is a stair that I didn't know about, the suitcase will fall first before I take a step forward. So I thought that a suitcase would be good. And as we experimented the AI Suitcase, I believe that this was a great idea. So in this Corona era, visually impaired people are now facing new hurdles. As you hear in the news, for example, pushing buttons on the elevator, you have to touch them. I mean, we have to touch and feel our way, but we don't want to touch surfaces because they may be infected. It's very difficult for us to have social distance when we are queuing. And when we are in trouble, it has become very difficult to ask people for help. It's very difficult now to ask for assistance from a guide helper as well. So in the AI Suitcase project, we have focused on trying to solve these problems and enhance the functions so that we can avoid collision while keeping distance. And there are many people who are walking with their smartphones in their hands, and they may not notice that we are walking towards them. So the AI Suitcase will have a very important function. And also the suitcase may be able to understand that there is a queue in front of you, and it will help us keep social distance as we take part in that line. So I would like to show you a very short video. So take me to the sock area. The AI Suitcase guides you towards the area where we can find socks. And the smartphone is reading out the size of the sock and the color and the function that it has. It also tells you how much it costs. Please take me to the cashier. The robot is telling you that you are now lining up. The cashier asks you to come forward, and the suitcase will also help you do that. So as you can see, the RF reader or RFID reader is being used so that you can pick up the product that you want, and you can avoid colliding with other people, and you can line up in front of the cashier without any problems. So in this Corona era, through technology, we may be able to resolve certain issues that we face. However, in order to do this, we still need to implement this in society, because innovation and social implementation is something that we cannot separate. It's the two wheels on a cart. So people must use it in order to improve it, or else we will not be able to actually use it in society. However, in order to have social implementation, there are many hurdles. For example, privacy in public, using sensors and wearable devices in public. There are many people who are against this in terms of privacy, and also there are still hurdles in terms of safety. So even if the users are using new technology based on their own responsibility, maybe if there's an accident, who is going to be responsible for that? That it's still a discussion that is ongoing here in Japan. So the level 5 self-driving cars, even if this comes out, children or visually impaired people, people who don't have driver's license, will society accept us using this? This is something that we will need to overcome. And in order to overcome these hurdles, it may take a long time. However, as we live with the coronavirus, we may take approaches to accelerate these changes. So leaving no one behind. This is the basic concept behind the SDGs. We don't want to leave anyone behind. Right now, it may seem impossible. However, as we try to develop new technologies and new devices, we will be able to take a step forward. So in the post-corona era, this will not change. And as one visually impaired person, I will utilize my own experience so that technologies could be realized and we can live in society together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. The message of leaving no one behind is a very important piece of information. And there were a number of issues covered in your presentations. And I think that many of the challenges are applicable not only for people with visual disabilities, but other people as well. And these issues are not limited to people who have disabilities. And I think that these are really universal needs for everyone. These technologies need to be socially implemented, thereby achieving a breakthrough. But then how should the society be changing towards the creation of such a society? The microphone now goes to Professor Hiroi of Kyoto University. Hello, everyone. The year 2020 was the year that has dramatically changed the society and our way of life. We have mounting issues, but crisis can be turned into an opportunity. So we have to elicit positive outcomes out of something negative. And that is where I'm coming from, giving you this presentation this morning. I would like to mention two things. One is about the shift towards distributed system, and two is the shift from information to life. Next slide. First, about our shift towards distributed system. With and post-corona have led to an understanding of new normals. But has the life been normal before the emergence of this new normal? This is the picture of a jam-packed train of rush hour in Tokyo. And I would rather say that this is such an abnormal situation because this is a situation of extreme density. So the pandemic has given us an opportunity to regain more humane ways of life. Key here would be the shift from concentration to distribution. Next slide. About 3 years ago, Hitachi Kyoto University Lab has started a new project to create a sustainability simulation scenario based on AI. In order for Japan to become sustainable by the year 2050, what should we do in terms of population, social welfare, regional management, and environmental resource conservation? Even though I cannot go into the detail with the limited time, but the outcomes of this analysis was as follows. The future of Japan, should it be concentrated one in urban areas or distributed across different regions? And in a time span of 8 to 10 years, and that is the question that we will have to make a decision within the next decade or so. And then from the viewpoint of health, happiness, distributed system was more preferable. And that was the outcome we obtained 3 years ago. But this year, I was pleasantly surprised that the challenge faced by the pandemic and the outcome or the interim conclusion our research have arrived at were quite similar. And I actually have an animation, but this is the process of the simulation. This is a simulation into 2040. The red in the left bottom is the urbanization model, and the other are the distributed system. So the system is moving from concentrated system all the way to the right side into a more distributed system. Now, talking of distributed society, what is it like? Japan being such a concentrated city, it may be difficult to imagine what it looks like, but this is a case from Germany. This is a city that has a population of about 1,000. This is Erlangen city. And this is a very typical German city. This also excludes automobiles and people on wheelchair or women pushing strollers can freely walk about in the city. Also, what I'm really impressed about this city is the fact that this is a city full of vitality. Because if you look at a city in Tokyo with only 100,000, in Japan, the city would be much less vital. So this kind of distributed system is having a virtuous cycle in terms of distribution and the wellness of and well-being of the people. These are typical pictures of regional cities that is less vital. So distributed system is something that seems to be a bit more difficult for Japan to attain if we cannot change our system. And these issues are not unrelated to the fact that population is declining. This is the population trend in Japan. It peaked out in 2008, and we are now having declining population. It is mostly like a roller coaster ride. BAU would lead to a population less than 100,000 in 2030. We are now at a turning point. Put differently, we cannot continue as we used to do. We have to come from a very different thought process for us to survive going forward. Next slide. So during the period of population increase, it really coincided with the concentration in Tokyo, but we are now in a reverse format, and I feel that especially looking at young generation, this is a program of Return to Hometown Fair that is held annually in Yurakucho, and this event has been attended by an older generation in the past, but this event is very popular among younger generation. So younger people are more interested in returning to hometowns. And I feel that on my daily, I see that in my students as well. So the shift towards this distributed system can be precipitated under the pandemic, but this also is happening along with the declining population. And this will have implications not in terms of Tokyo and non-Tokyo cities, but this will go forward in a more comprehensive manner because it will be distributed onto other dimensions of life, including the way of life or way to work. Now let me briefly touch upon the shift from information to life. My area of specialty is science history, so I'm half science and half literature people. And the concept of science has changed since 17th century. It started as a material science to energy science, information science, and then finally going to the phase of life science, as has been accentuated by the COVID-19 pandemic. So from the material science, it turned into energy science in 19th century, and then industrial science has been followed by the information science in the 20th century, and we'll be focusing more onto life aspect of science. In terms of information science, Claude Shannon formulated the concept of bit technology, and that has been applied to industrial use and then into the society at large. And this is now maturing to its fullest as we live today. Kurzweil, American futurist, who led the singularity theory, says that life can be explained by information or reduced to information. But ironically, COVID-19 has revealed that life cannot really be reduced into information. It is much more than information because they do have unique emergent and endogenesis facet contained in it. Now, in the period of post-information into the period of life, we are now at a confluence point, and the Science Agora is having life as its theme this year. And life means much beyond life science. It also encompasses livelihood or life as a journey. It also has micro as well as macro perspective of life that may include entire ecosystem and the planet as well. Next slide. Economically speaking, life-related industry or life economy, if you will, is becoming increasingly important. There are at least 5 areas in this science economy, including science, health and medicine, environment, life and livelihood and welfare, and agriculture and culture, as has been asserted by Angela Merkel of Germany, because culture is indispensable for the sustenance of life, as she argued. So the way of society is changing dramatically. The declining population is one aspect to this dramatic change, and this change has been overshadowed by the pandemic. And all these have been accentuated, and these will be only more important going forward. And that is what I wanted to share this morning. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. And life economy. A very new term, but yes, looking back, environment and life, the society's interest is heading in that direction. I think we are seeing a shift. So post-information society, I believe now the information industry is where Mr. Shinohara is working in. So now I'd like to have Mr. Shinohara from NTT. Thank you very much for the introduction. Yes, I have been in charge of research and technological development ever since I entered my company. But if you look at this chart, in the past, as science and technology advanced, we have seen efficiency improve or convenience improve. And as a result of that, our economy and our life has improved, and we found that our lives were becoming richer. But in recent years, it seems that the improvement of efficiency and convenience, yes, it is still ongoing, but there is this gap between what people feel as a enriching life. So there is this big gap becoming bigger and bigger. And the reason for that is, for example, there is bullying on social media or environmental issues, and there are other many challenges that we face. Therefore, science and technology should not just chase efficiency and convenience. In addition to that, science and technology needs to focus on well-being. I believe that is the correct way to go. Well, then, what do we mean by well-being? And what Dr. Watanabe has written about this in his book, but well-being, it's the medical well-being. whether you're healthy or not, or hedonic well-being, is it comfortable or not, and also the continuous or sustained endemonic well-being. Do you feel it is worth living? Do you feel a sense of achievement? So there are these different types of well-beings, and in addition to that, there are things internal and there are interpersonal things. Do you have a good relationship with others? Can you sympathize with others? These factors that happen in between individuals that constitute well-being. Well, then, under Corona, what happened to well-being? There are things that improved and there are things that became worse. So first, people were liberated from the restriction of time or from restriction to place or restriction to distance. So time-wise, for example, you had more free time under Corona, or now you can have medical checks online. You don't have to travel, and also liberation from place. For example, we have created an avatar system. So people who were unable to travel from their homes, they can become a receptionist using an avatar at our company. So maybe we can see these positive aspects. Liberation from place, people moving to the suburbs or rural area, people are working from their home, liberation from distance traveling. Yes, I have had some online parties. You can also have online parties with your old friends, maybe your school friends, and that was one positive that came out of the coronavirus. So we have seen some reduced stress because of all these things. However, on the other hand, we have seen a lot of well-being becoming worse. On the left-hand side, you can see that there is this filter bubble. You may be watching just news that pleases you, and your perspective may become very stereotyped, or you may be watching a lot of fake news and also personal information protection related regulations about the 2000 difficulties that it is facing. And also, because you are just connected remotely, you can't really share space together with others, and you don't really feel the presence of others. And the real life connections are becoming less and less. So from the left-hand side, we sometimes see conflicting perspectives arising. For example, in the US presidential election, because of the filter bubble, you can see a lot of these conflicting perspectives. And also, because we aren't sharing accurate information, people feel a sense of anxiety. And because we are not sharing space, we may feel alienated or lonely, or we can't really feel a sense of reality or a feeling of fulfillment. These well-being, the interpersonal factor of well-being is actually becoming less and less, and therefore it is leading to more stress building up. Well then, now, the future society interpandemic, I say interpandemic because maybe we will have another pandemic. I'm not saying it will happen, but there may be other tragedies happening, for example, like earthquakes. So after we overcome this pandemic, we need to prepare for the next big thing to happen. So the interpandemic and the future society, we need to rebuild and reopen our social and economic activities. We need to prepare our social and economic structure for the next pandemic. We need to make it more resilient. And we also want to make sure that we can realize a well-being for ourselves, our peers, and also for the society. And what are the issues that we need to overcome? The digital agency is also taking this up, but speedy and exhaustive and shared information collection as well as visualization and also utilizing data will become the normal. It has to change in that way. And also new challenges as they arise, how speedily can we respond to them, being more agile, or being architecture oriented so that we can really speed up our responses. That would become very important. And also in terms of well-being, if we are to improve it, we shouldn't be passively just accepting information. We need to go out there and gain information. And also in the virtual space, how do we try to strengthen our connection between people? And each individual must act voluntarily and autonomously to seek these links with others. And when we do all this, as we've heard, we need to have inclusivity. We don't want to leave anyone behind. That was a must. Now, the fifth Science Technology Basic Plan talks about Society 5.0 and the digital transformation. As you see at the bottom here, Society 1.0 was the hunting and collecting society. Society 2.0 is the farming society. Moving up to industry, Society 4.0 is an information society. And the society that comes next is what we are trying to create right now. So Society 5.0, one key word here would be data utilization and also imagination. And imagination is not just imagination of people who develop new technologies. When we utilize that in society, we need to have the user's imagination and creativity as well. So people who use technology, by using a technology, we can resolve social issues and we can gain new perspective, meaning that this is not just about reducing manpower or seeking efficiency and automation or optimization. We need to create new value for people living in society. So this is a people-centered strengthening and maximization of well-being. And when we do that, and this is my last slide, but there are several hurdles that needs to be overcome. So the effectiveness and risk, we need to really look at this calmly. If there's a new technology, we shouldn't just focus on the efficiency and the uses of that. We need to also look at risks. For example, privacy or personal information. How do we handle that? If people become anxious about that, it may not be useful. So this assessment between the effectiveness and the risk is something that may be missing here in Japan. So under Corona, we must take a step forward in this direction. Secondly, people don't want to change the status quo. People have this bias toward maintaining the status quo, but we need to get out of that or else we won't be able to take a step forward. And third point is we tend to seek 100% perfection before providing something, and people who accept things also want 100% perfection. But if we are to move speedily, we should start from maybe 60%. If it's okay, we start using it and then we improve it as we use it. So that needs to be understood and accepted by people who provide and also people who accept. And in order to do that, there are 4 points underneath: autonomous information access, internet should not dominate us. We should be more proactive in getting the information. And secondly, it's expanding our sensitivity, our senses. Thirdly, so there's the risk as well as effectiveness, and therefore we need to have dialogue with society concerning science and technology. And the important thing here is there may be no 100% perfect answer. So rather than trying to gain agreement, we want to have a dialogue so that we can get consent. So my well-being and my wife's well-being may be different, but the well-being of different people, by discussing this, we try to gain a consensus, maybe compromise here or there to gain a consensus among all these people. So that is all from myself. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shinohara-san. So, targeting towards consensus, or from consensus to acceptance, and also people-to-people connection, also the sense of sensitivity, or interesting concept. Digital transformation, or the term technology, often make us think about efficiency, but going forward, there is something beyond efficiency, person-to-person connections, or the full sense of fulfillingness that is going to be important going forward. Next presentation. Well, against the backdrop of dramatic change in society and economy, how should we be able to change? And that is something Toyama-san is going to talk about. I will be discussing about the way we connect the real society and science and technology. Dr. Hamaguchi talked about the changes over the last 30, 40 years, Japanese businesses and science and technology research taking the lead in the world. But put it differently, when Japan was labeled as Japan as number one, Japan was the country that was attracting much attention from around the world. That was the time when I was studying from 1990 to 1992 at GSB Stanford University, and U.S. economy was really having a difficulty. Stanford was such a poor university, and in the 1980s there was a major earthquake in San Francisco, and they really couldn't fix the infrastructure. And for example, the water fountain on the campus was not running because it hasn't been fixed. After my graduation, digital transformation has been advanced, and then that has eventually led to disruptive innovation, and Apple made a beautiful comeback, and Stanford has now become a very rich university. And the same was true for the economy in the vicinity. That was fine. However, Japan and Japanese business has become a laggard, if you will. Now, after 30 years, what is happening in the United States, as someone mentioned, there are certain complicated issues facing the United States, be it the division or the disparity. And in terms of well-being, how can society and technology drive well-being, and has it made a positive impact on the American society? In the meantime, without science and technology, economic growth or well-being cannot be achieved. That is another set of truth as well. Under the pandemic, digital transformation or technology development will only be more important in business or people's way of life. This may have a disruptive impact, meaning that existing businesses are having a very difficult situation. I also work as a director of Panasonic. TV technology has already been disrupted and destroyed. In what sense? You see, purchasing a TV ensured the means to enjoy visual contents, and terrestrial TV was free of charge because you can just watch the TV with commercials. And then people have been making investment or developing a technology, and they were able to recover the investment. But TV sets are selling, but people are using the TV sets, using YouTube's or other content. So consumers can now have many different choices as to how to use the TV sets. So political and sociological changes are happening as we speak, and some of the people's livelihood has been destroyed as well. And that is why we are now seeing such a difficult situation. Now, science and technology is exerting increasingly powerful impact. So the way we use science and technology will be a major question. As Shinohara-san mentioned, well-being isn't really mutually exclusive with economic prosperity. As Dr. Tetsu Nakamura mentioned, enjoying dinner at home every night can be achieved only if you have a solid economic foundation. Relative poverty or social poverty is making it difficult for many families to enjoy dinner every night. And the same is true for the US. And that is causing resistance in some corners of society. And science and technology has always had positive and negative aspects. So the question here is to focus on the positive side of science and technology. And science and technology is accelerating exponentially, and human wisdom is sometimes has not been able to catch up with the rate at which the science and technology is developing. And that gap is becoming increasingly salient under the pandemic. So the human being needs to better handle science and technology that it has developed.
So then what is important here? In just one word, I believe we need to have a common language. In Japan, I believe there are many silos that we see, not just in the administration, walls between industries and companies, and also between the university and the industry. So there are many walls. And so in an industrialized society, if we are to seek productivity, you have these silos and you work within that silo, and that was really effective. And that's why we built up these walls. And also this big Tokyo block and the rural block within the Tokyo walls, if you make things efficient inside, that was good. And so yes, that there was meaning in doing that, but Professor Hiroi talked about this, but that's the questionable part. 6 years ago, I wrote this book about local economy revitalizing here in Japan, but it seems that many things are now facing walls and hurdles. So the big changes that we are seeing is becoming more conspicuous under Corona, and technology is driving policy and industry, and I believe this will be accelerated even further, which means it is all up to us how we handle the situation. Well, then, what is the key in breaking down these walls? It's the common language. I'm not saying that there are actual walls here. We have these walls because we are not talking a common language. Well, then, who should make more effort? I believe the answer is, well, including myself and all the other panelists here, if you look at the situation here in Japan, the elites are not making effort at all. People who graduate from university, very fortunately, you have been educated, you are working in wonderful environments, and including the university professors as well as big company executives and elite workers, they are not making effort. About 5,000 people are being employed in the rural area in public transportation, and I believe in well-being we should include the public transportation. And we are providing services in very depopulated areas. People who work there are the majority in Japan. I believe somebody mentioned that there are more small and medium-sized companies, and about 70% of workers are working in these SMEs. So the center of gravity should move towards that area, and therefore we need to have a common language to talk with them. Do scientists have that common language? People who live in that sphere, it is very difficult for them to acquire our language, the scientists' language. So the important thing here is fortunately, people who have been educated well, the elites in the society, people who have the higher awareness, for lack of a better word, people like that should look towards the people who are working and making effort on a daily basis, people who are working for the well-being of others, the essential workers. These are the people who have been out there doing the critical job under Corona, as well as under the nuclear power accident and under disaster. The elite company executives were useless because they didn't have the skills to move big machinery to get things done after a disaster. And it's the same with the medical services being provided today and the care being provided today. So the effort should be made more on the scientist and developer side. Under this pandemic, Dr. Umi and other people, the top scientists in that area, have tried to speak in layman's terms about the virus. They were trying to communicate from the perspective of ordinary citizens, and I believe that's the effort that we really need to do, really need to make. And so making it a business is not bad. Science and technology, the CRISPR-Cas9 scientists that got the Nobel Prize may be an example, but there may be direct positive effects. So how useful will your research be in society? So if it is useful, it may become business because people will want to pay for that. And so that will be determined by whether or not you have a common language.
And you have to take measures to people when they cannot afford those services or technologies with some public funding perhaps. But these are the questions that those on the side of the science and technology have to think about. Also, it is not really a trade-off relations between having a common language and promoting sophisticated in science and technology. And this isn't really the division between science and literature. And people on the side of the science and technology and those users, not only those working for blue chip companies, but those in essential professions in regional cities, have to think about that. That is a very fundamental question, and I would like to end my presentation here. Thank you very much, Toyama-san. So you really have to have a common language, and that is very important. Looking at the world affairs today, science and technology and its development has been advancing at a faster rate than the rate of our wisdom, if you will. Now, let's think about the future of the society going forward after the pandemic. So what science and technology and what can we do going forward? Now, there's some announcement for those tuning in, and Q&A function can be used to pose questions during the panel discussion. And we cannot entertain all the questions due to limited time available, but we will be introducing several questions from the ones we receive, and we will ask these questions to the panelists. If you have any burning questions, please do give us those questions via the QA window. Now we will start the discussion. The first theme is how to connect the outcomes of research and development into society and industry towards the future society. We have found several keywords: individualism or unique strength, or society not leaving behind anyone, or the science and technology attaching importance to person-to-person connections, and also the common language between science and people. There is still a wall between the implementation of the technology and the technology development. So these are the walls that we have to overcome. In order to promote successful social implementation, what do we have to do on the part of the government, on the part of the business, and the citizens? And these are the questions that I'm going to ask. So, the walls of society, walls of R&D. So what is the size of the walls? Asakawa-san? As a researcher, I am currently working on a new technology, and I've been thinking every day how we can socially implement this technology at an earliest stage possible, and that is the wall that I'm facing. And I really agree with the things that have been posted by my fellow panelists. We have to negotiate with the people who owns the forum or own the area where the technology is implemented. And introduction of a new product is easier once you can get an approval for the usage. And also the organization, if they need such a technology, may actually request for such a product. But from the viewpoint of a researcher, when they're trying to sell the new product or product as a work in progress, you have to start off with something that only have 60% of a perfect product. But even if it scores only 60 out of 100, you can still argue that the product can be useful for the society. But the challenge we face now is to promote the implementation of such innovation. But the certification process is very complicated. You don't know who you need to talk to or who you should get the permission from, and it's always painstakingly and also time consuming. And often such a request cannot find a good decision maker. So we need an organization or a unit to drive innovation, to communicate the needs of the researcher or developers. And that, I think, will probably precipitate the process. System and institution are very important. And asserting that the technology is 60% out of 100 would not suffice. We really have to ensure safety as well of the new product for fair assessment of the technology. And these are things that we need. But just arguing wouldn't be agile enough. We really have to be time conscious. We have to be setting some deadlines to have some response within 1 month or 3 months or so on. And special review process may be in need, especially under the pandemic. Doing so, SDGs, we only have 10 minutes left for the achievement or the goal year of SDGs, and we have to be efficient and creative over the next 10 years. Another aspect is the understanding and tolerance on the part of the society. When a new technology is implemented in a society, people will be curious about the new technology and may feel uneasy about the new technology, but the new technology needs to be explained, and such communication needs to be two-way. New technology, when demonstrated, should be advertised with posters communicating what's being under development. Or through an event like today's, we can introduce new technologies to people to gain wider understanding of the technology, science and technology on the part of the public. Privacy-related issues or cyber attack risks. When these items are covered in the news, TV news, those away from science and technology can feel uneasy or may feel insecure about the new technology. So accurate information needs to be communicated to people. And at a venue like Miraikan or in other fora, we have to have more opportunity to discuss this topic. People's as well as organizational understanding needs to be precipitated, especially under this period, for a speedy decision and speedy understanding. Thank you. So the speed of science and technology is accelerating, and you really cannot wait for the technology to become perfect. You have to start with something that is not necessarily perfect, but you have to start moving towards social consensus. The permission process or the regulation is very complicated, and it is often very time consuming. So the system or the institution has lots of room for improvement. Hamaguchi-san, what do you think about this?
The issue of approval is something that always troubles us. Under the coronavirus, there are a lot of technologies that could inactivate the coronavirus, and we want to bring this to society. If it's just 99.9% inactivation of the masks or renewing the air inside the venue, but But 99.99% perfection is necessary according to the Consumer Affairs Agency. We lack that last part if it's just 99.9. Since the Meiji era, we have been seeking science and technology, and we now have very complex systems and very complex laws and regulations, and everything is stuck in that. And also, after graduating from university, you enter a company and you have a lifelong employment. You are doing the same job all through your life, and that has created a lot of silos within society. When I went to the United States, I felt that the society is really flexible. You can really work and connect horizontally. You can connect with other industries. But here in Japan, you have to stay inside your own sphere. There is no communication across different spheres. For example, university and industries. Of long-term research projects. You may be using the same word, but it means very different things. Long-term in universities means 10 years or maybe for a lifetime, but for companies, long-term means 3 years until during this president's term. So I believe Toyama-san has also talked about this, but there is this gap, this discrepancy between different segments. So this may be a roundabout way, but I think informed consent is what's necessary. In the past, in the medical field, let's say you get cancer, how do you treat that patient? Well, the patient may die, but in the past, we have been told that we shouldn't tell the patient the truth. I do have relatives who died of cancer, but we couldn't tell him that he had cancer because if we break the news, that may throw the person in despair. But we want the patient to trust the doctors so that they can go through treatment. And let's say you are told that you might need a fourth surgery, and then as I was talking to the patient, he didn't want that fourth surgery. He said that he doesn't want his brain to be scraped away because that may make him useless. So, and the medical world has thought that informed consent is very important. The patient should have the right to decide his own life and fate. Meaning, in real life, each individual citizen should be able to determine their own fate. It's not the scientists and people in the technology side. Science and technology may advance, but it also creates a lot of shadows and darkness in dark places, and we cannot really anticipate what will happen there. So we should be able to explain what may happen with a certain technological development and have consensus among the citizens. That is the weakness that we see in Japan. So you might think that what is this person saying under this time of pandemic and threat, but we still need to talk about these things. If people lost their jobs, if they are in trouble, we need to feel that pain as our own. And by talking, well, you might think that this is peer pressure, but don't force yourself to sympathize. You need to be understanding. You need to be able to accept, and then you want to form consensus and then move forward. So using the same word and trying to understand each other, well, citizens or lay persons, we tend to say, well, let's talk and that's okay. We're using the same Japanese language, and whether you take a step forward or not may not be that difficult. That's the way we tend to think. But is it so difficult to overcome these walls? Well, there are a lot of uncertainties, and science is not perfect. But sometimes scientists believe that we have to show lay people that science is perfect or else we won't be accepted. But I think we need to be more honest, and scientists have been seeking the truth. But beyond that, how do we create well-being and happiness for all people? We need to understand that that's the work that we're trying to pursue. So, but do scientists really feel that way? That's something we need to discuss further. Thank you very much. So on the citizen side as well as the scientist side, people in the area of science and technology, where are we headed for, and what discussions to take place with what partners is something very important. Now, Dr. Hamaguchi has talked about changing culture so that we can move forward, but I think Dr. Asakawa also said that we need to be swift and we need to be quick. That's the situation we are facing. So then, once again, I'd like to go to Toyama-san, but you talked about having a common language. I think we have heard from the other panelists, but a quick prescription. Do you have any ideas about a quick prescription for this? Well, 60% perfection. There are a lot of things that we can determine with just 60% within a company. But why do things stop? Well, the decision, if you have a lot of people involved in the decision-making process, of course somebody would say this may be a problem because Japan moves on consensus. Therefore, it's very difficult if you have a lot of people. Companies holding a discussion with each other. For example, a pitch event in Silicon Valley. When the top people are talking, they may have an agreement, but then you start discussing with other people in the company and the discussion gets lost. So you have to restrict the number of people involved in the decision making. You don't want to work from the bottom. Yes, in Japan you have this hierarchy because you have this lifelong employment. People on the ground wouldn't understand it, but not the people on the top. But M&A in the United States, only the CXO are involved. The professionals are involved in making the decisions. They make the decision and then they go for it. But then in Japan, Japanese CXOs, do they really understand the actual things that are happening on the ground? Do they read the papers that have been published? Not many of them actually read these. So it seems that you have to take risks. You have to do these trials, and the risks takers have to be the top management people. The top management people should make the decision quickly without involving a lot of people under them. And I've been saying that again and again and again. And another point, Japanese companies don't have mobility, don't have liquidity. You have these walls between companies and walls between industry and companies. I think about 10% of people within the company should move. Bus companies, yes, you may need a lifelong employment. Not many people have these strong voices, but if people, elite companies, if you have 30 people or 40 people who came out of the top prestigious universities, that may stall things. So 10% turnover among the top level elites would be best.
Thank you very much. Ground level decision makers are needed. Also, the number of people involved in decision making should be limited. And informed consent is probably is important. Of course, information is asymmetrical. The reason why we have to be top down is because, you see, you really have to ensure symmetrical information. With full transparency, bold decision can be made top down. So much of the information is hierarchical, and then you will have all the discussions, and then it lacks transparency. And that is the nature of the business organization as we see today. And they often think about self-defense in terms of individuals or organizations. And that is why the process is slowed down. So once you ensure full transparency, excluding asymmetrical nature of information, and also you do also have repercussions, both positive and negative, but all those negative repercussions can be borne by the top management. And then if he really made a wrong judgment, and then he can probably leave the work, and then he can still survive, even if one is to leave after making a risky decisions. So top management and the decision making needs to be ensured, and that also demands common language, I think. Also, in terms of low mobility between public and private sector, or the talent liquidity being so rigid is another issue. Shinohara-san, what do you think about this? Lack of mobility among elite personnel in terms of Japanese science and technology policy. Toyama-san, I believe, son's definition is very wide, and I agree with Toyama-san too. Science and technology, as far as science and technology is concerned, mutual understanding between the academia and the industry is very important. And long-term definition, having a very different span of time between the business and the academia, is a good example. Academia and the industry sector have to ensure higher mobility of talents, especially in terms of social implementation. Blue sky research will, of course, aim at developing something totally new and at the very top of the world standard. But in terms of social implementation, the focus is user friendliness. That also involves users' perspective as well. And so in order to precipitate social implementation and for success of the project, higher mobility between the private and public sector as well as academia needs to be raised. So actual use of technology, or the users needs to discuss with those who develop those technologies as well. And that is a good segue to the second theme of this discussion. For us to further improve our life, what kind of perspective is needed on the part of the citizens? What kind of discussion is needed with whom and where and how? So under the pandemic, we are in a pool of information as a layperson, along with the asymmetrical nature of information. You often are faced with a decision without sufficient information, background information, and that can cause a sense of insecurity. Science is something that you can fully rely on, and sometimes you feel at a loss. Say, for example, one of the top head of the state recommend that the injection can be made to kill all the virus. So how can you ensure the trustworthiness of science and technology so that the citizen, each and every one of the laypersons, can be empowered, pushing for a new society? And what kind of dialogue is needed? And on this, a science and science technology ridger, Hiroi-san, will you pitch in to this question? Thank you. Listening to today's discussion, I have felt that the uncertainty of science is something that we have to think about. COVID-19's impact have different scenarios, especially at the nascent phase of the pandemic. And the mechanism of the emergence of this new virus, and also the different fatality or the infection between Asian countries and Europe. So there are a number of questions left unanswered, even among the experts. Views can be divided. So it's not that there is one single truth which needs to be scientifically translated or interpreted. And that isn't a formula is no longer like that. Well, it has always been like that, actually. Something unknown is being explored by scientists with all those questions, and that is one of the attractiveness of science as well. Science having one single truth is not what is happening, and this kind of mindset needs to be shattered. We have to admit that there are so many unanswered questions, and experts in science may have different ideas or understanding, and that should be the starting point of this discussion. So, not knowing anything isn't really a skepticism that I'm suggesting, but rather towards something unknown, we together have to explore in search of a question. And that is the process that we should pursue. And science and society are inseparable. Societal issues are better understood by laypersons. So this isn't really a dichotomy of science and society, but rather these two are being increasingly overlapped. So scientists and laypersons are the same in this sense. They are in the same boat. And that is the perspective that needs to be employed. Another thing that I would like to point out is this. Toyama-san mentioned about the division between the literature and science, and the wall between science people and literature person is way too solid than it should be, especially in Japan. But we really should break down the wall between science and literature, or science and art. And that needs to be brought together. The amendment of the Science and Technology Act has made it possible to tackle the scientific issues with science and literature people together, which I think is a major progress. So you have to bring down the wall between science and art. And I mentioned Hitachi Kyoto University Lab. Personally, collaboration between academia and industry is the same, and Hitachi and Kyoto University Lab is working very well, as far as I'm concerned, for the following reasons. There are two reasons, in fact. Businesses, especially large businesses, have come into an understanding that things need to be grasped from a mid to longer term point of view, be it SDGs or ESG investment. Longer term perspective is indispensable for one to better understand the future in 3, 5, or even 1 year ahead. Academia, ironically speaking, tends to be more short-sighted. Their time span is getting shorter and shorter, and that is posing an issue. But Hitachi Kyoto University Lab is a very good example, and it is really showcasing a Japanese business taking a longer perspective. So the time span is getting converged, and the business people are in the dark as to what they should be talking, and I, as a literature and art person, aware of all of those social issues, be it the hollowing of the regional cities or depopulation or communities or issues of disparities. There are a range of issues, and what we need are solutions. In this regard, universities and businesses and science and laypersons, or literature and art, they are getting converged, the distance or gap being closed, and we are now into a newer phase, and that is something that we have to further promote going forward.
Thank you very much for that. So the success cases of Hitachi Kyoto University Laboratory, it seems that companies are having a longer-term perspective, and on the other hand, universities are having a shorter perspective, for better or for worse. And you also talked about science. Of course, the technicians and scientists know more about science, but they may not know what issues are out there in society. I believe the citizens know that better, and so maybe a discussion, a dialogue between the two is important. Now I'd like to ask Mr. Shinohara, the science, technology, communication, what attitude should lay people have, the citizens have? We may feel as if we don't know anything when we talk to scientists, or we may think that it may be shameful to be asking these simple questions. So what attitude is necessary? Well, as many people have been saying, the scientists also need to reflect upon our behavior and attitude. Science and technology, there are a lot of uncertainties involved, and we should expose to citizens that there are a lot of uncertainties, and maybe the citizens will accept that. But we feel that we are to blame if we say that. So sometimes we tend to show that everything is certain, but scientists and technology people do understand what certain technologies can do, but what is the world that we want to create? What is the society that we want to create? I believe there needs to be a dialogue between citizens and scientists in order to form this. Let's say you have this kettle. A kettle can boil water. So the kettle and boiling water, not just talking about the pros and cons of that. I'm not really sure what to say, but maybe you can use the kettle for other purposes. Maybe that's another dialogue that we can have. So there are a lot of roads that separate as we go along the way in developing a new technology. So you need to have this dialogue to seek these new passages. So dialogue in order to see where a certain technology can go to. And maybe young people may not know this, but when I was in my 30s, we had these pagers. We were given pagers. Company workers were given pagers. But suddenly, young female students started using the pagers, and the pagers took on a different meaning. It was not just to call workers back to the workplace. Young girls started using it in new ways. They created a new usage. So rather than talking about one use of a certain product, what is it that you can do with the technology? You have to have this dialogue so that you can create these many different usage. And the basic law has changed, and from now on, the humanities and sciences will be integrated together. But humanities, sciences, and social science being integrated together, maybe we can talk about a future study. Maybe we can have that being taught from a very young age. So future study, that sounds quite exciting, but maybe that would lead to our literacy becoming improved, and maybe we will have a basis for discussion. Now, in relation to this, and yes, scientists, of course, they need to be able to talk, but what would you like to see from society? What kind of dialogue would you seek from society? So, for example, Dr. Asakawa, what is your take on this? Well, this is a very difficult question, but as I listen to the discussion today, the scientists maybe should take the first step, the first move. We, in our field of specialty, we are trying to carry out research to seek certain dreams, but how will that be accepted in society? We need to have that dialogue with citizens to understand that. And yes, the key word was speak and using a common language. But I think we need to have more opportunities to speak with citizens, and citizens may have a lot of themes, and science and technology is covering a wide range of themes. And so when citizens come to this dialogue, they may need to select certain information. But we want citizens to be interested. We want you to access a lot of information, not just relying on one news source. Look at the same information from different perspectives. And by doing so, the depth and the width of dialogue will expand. And in the US or Europe, for example, the US universities, in the corridor, you will find a lot of elderly people, and there are people with visual disabilities. I was speaking to a woman in her 80s, and I asked her why she was here. She said she was going to take a certain class. So in U.S. universities, citizens, including elderly people, there are many people who come to university to take courses offered by professors. Yes, there may be open universities here in Japan, but I haven't heard much about them. So, in that sense, providing such opportunities and providing it from the scientist side, and I'm hoping that citizens will take up these opportunities proactively so that we can have a more diverse opinion flowing into the scientist community. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So, the university, senior citizens walking along the corridor in universities, if we can see that happening everywhere, maybe a lot of dialogue will start from there. And so, how do we create these fora for a dialogue? How do we open these opportunities to citizens may be important. So, Dr. Hamaguchi, any thoughts on that? Well, looking at how COVID-19 spread, I think Japan was quite flexible in a sense. Maybe there are two reasons to this. One is the education level is quite high among citizens, and the other is we did have a lot of IT technology, and so a lot of information became accessible, and many people were able to utilize that technology. Even among people in their 60s and 70s, they were utilizing technology. I think this may be quite unique. Digitalization, we may be lagging behind, but a lot of IT technology is out there. And in the past 6 months or so, people have been staying at home, and a lot of musical instruments sold very well. So people started to take up new things in their life. And they started to realize what they can do. They realized their own new skills. I'm 69 years old, and I also started to realize I can do many new things. So COVID-19 has provided us with a little bit of happiness, but the problem is that we are not connected. We are doing all these things alone in an isolated way. And it's the same with science and technology. Universities may seem like very big institutions, but it's like very small stores bunched up together. Each store is doing what they want, and the university is just a cluster of these stores. But in order for that to lead to people's happiness and for well-being, we need to have a platform, or in other words, we need agora, a plaza where people can gather. So how do we utilize the internet, or maybe without the internet, in a more face-to-face way, how do we create that forum or plaza? I believe Japan has great potential in that. I hope and I believe we really need to do this.
And this is how Science Agora can play a critical role. Now we would like to start entertaining some questions from the audience. Shinohara-san mentioned the bias towards the status quo, we received a couple of questions on status quo and the bias towards it. How can we overcome this bias? That's the question from the audience. So, break through the bias towards status quo. There isn't a methodology, really. We have to overcome the status quo, and the endeavor may land in a failure, or you may end up in a better place. But if you stay in a status quo, you will be stuck in the status quo. And if the failure is a minor one, it is worth giving it a try. And that's the mental mindset that we need for laypersons, for academia, or for the business. The key here is the environment, be it an elementary school or a family setting. We shouldn't be putting a brake on someone's intention to try something new things. That, I think, is a very important mindset that we need as a society at large. Toyama-san, you have fought against a number of status quo through your career. I've been pointed this out many times. If you look at your life as a one-off tournament kind of game, then you will be wanting to stay in a status quo. And the same is true for the bureaucracy or for academia or for much of the business sector, because you don't want to take risks. So you should be thinking about this not as a tournament, but as a league games. You can win at times and you can lose some, win some, lose some kind of mindset. And it is important to try new things, and you may at times have to lose. But be it a business or a society, metabolism should be precipitated. And you also have to give people second chance after a minor failure. So inclusiveness was something that Japanese society has attached importance to. And for the inclusiveness, you have compromise mobility or metabolism. So we really have to create a new system of metabolism for the society at large. And that is where local economy or local communities can play a larger role. But exactly what can we do? Business managers, academia, the public sector, and society at large have to think seriously as to how they want to operate. And that may be a longer journey, but that is a worth journey to go. Thank you very much. So we've been talking about the future of society under the pandemic and the kind of society we want under this condition. In order to connect society and science, informed consent is key. And that it was one of the messages discussed in this discussion. Science and technology can sometimes be alienating for some, but from the people on the side of science and technology can use a language, a plainer language that can be better understood by laypersons. And uncertainty of science should also be disclosed as the very basic of the discussion. And citizens should not really shun away from those factors of uncertainties. And maybe you should just widen your contact, talking with people out of your silos, and you can sometimes be out of the box. And someone also pointed out that the musical instruments are selling better under the pandemic. So maybe you can find people with some common factors with people that you thought you wouldn't have any common factors, but that can really expand your circles. Another important factor, or the message found, was the mobility and liquidity of talents, and mobility and metabolism of a society. We feel we are stranded under the pandemic, but we do have lots of different potentialities and possibilities in different corners of societies, and we may in fact be able to succeed in a very different area. And the culture or society or the institution should be supportive of such endeavors. Individual or unique strength and no one leaving behind and life economy. There were many other keywords that were quite interesting. And how can we achieve these? And think this is the question that is concerning not only scientists but all the people, be it students or people in humanities or other areas. We call this Science Agora, and in fact, we may be changing the title of this program to Human Agora rather than Science Agora going forward. And today's discussion is being recorded and will be put on the website page of Science Agora. I hope you can watch it later, and on the official homepage of Science Agora and Facebook and Twitter pages can provide URL to the archived videos. Panelists, thank you very much for your contributions. From today, November 15th, all the way down to the 22nd of this month, Science Agora will be offering a range of different programs, and we also intend to provide fora to deepen discussion on each and every important topics of science. And that hopefully can provide you an opportunity to think about life once again. Thank you.